Hello everyone. Today is a banner day for the channel here because for the first time I'm going to review a collection of short horror stories. That's right, an anthology. And if there's going to be a first time for anything on this channel, it better be good. And trust me, it is. This is something you want to read. And we're going to talk about why right now. All right, so the book we're going to be talking about today is called All the Pretty Hells You See by CHRISTY ALDRIDGE. First of all, great name for a book, right? That's something that just draws your eye to it. And look at that cover. Look at that cover. Am I right? It's fantastic. But we don't judge books by their covers. We judge them for what's inside. And anthologies can be problematic sometimes. Well, because you have a lot of different authors in a certain book. Not all authors' styles will mesh with you. They don't connect with you. So you wind up having a couple stories that you really like, a few that you're like, yeah, it's okay, but then you have some that feel like throwaways. But I like anthologies when they're written by the same author, because even though the stories are different and the characters are all very different, it's still got that author's stamp on them. It's still got that author's voice. And if you like that author, if you read the first one by that author and you say, yes, I like this, then you know you're going to be in good, capable hands the rest of the way through. And that's definitely what this book brings to the table. I do want to say this book, first of all, thank you to CHRISTY for sending me an advanced review copy of this book. I really appreciate that. And you can pre-order it. The book will be out on May 10th, but there's a link down below. Yeah, you can go ahead and pre-order the book, and it will be delivered to you on that date. You're welcome. So watch this video, click that little link, and get your copy on May 10th. You're going to want to read it. Trust me on that. This book, I'm not going to talk about the individual stories because it is still in pre-order. It hasn't been published, and I do not want to spoil any of it because there are things you want to find out on your own, of course. But I will talk about why you should purchase this book if you like horror stories. First of all, let's talk about the pacing and the length. This author is very adept at knowing when a story needs to be short, sometimes only a couple pages. She gets in there, she gets to the point, punches you in the throat, and gets out. And then she knows when other stories need a bit more coaxing, when it needs a bit more, they need a bit more suspense, a bit more tension being built up before coming to a bloody, horrific finale. And that's something I think some authors might struggle with. There's always talk in the horror world that this author is too wordy or this author isn't wordy enough. But none of these stories overstay their welcome at all. They're like the perfect length for each one, building the characters, building the scenes, and delivering that final punch at the end. What I like is that a few of these stories are about the concept of love and relationships. And I'm sure everybody's aware right now that love and horror are really almost two sides of the same coin, right? Because in these stories, it's not about love gone bad necessarily, love gone wrong, because that's a pretty common concept. Love goes wrong. Man or woman does horrible things to their significant others, that kind of thing. But these are stories about people that actually are in a committed, true relationship. They are soulmates. They're committed to each other. They trust each other. They love each other. And yet underneath that thin veneer of happiness that relationships and love can bring, there always lurks something dark, something under the surface that's waiting to come up throw a hand grenade on that relationship, blowing it to pieces, and perhaps blowing to pieces the mental state of the people involved. And she does a really good job of showing that, yes, love is grand, love is great, but then when certain things happen, maybe it would have been better to not have loved at all, as the old saying goes. And I really like that because, like I said, love gone wrong is kind of easy to make a horror story out of, but people in a loving, trusting, firm relationship is a little bit harder to get to that point. But she does it so wonderfully here. And her writing is so beautiful when she does it that you're not even aware until the end that you're sitting there with your hair standing up at how creepy and how deliciously evil some of this stuff is. So the pacing is great and on point. The themes of love that run throughout are great. But she also writes from different generations. So there is something in this book for everybody. There are stories in here about people in their 20s all the way up to their 80s. And I don't know if she's doing a Benjamin Button and slowly reversing her age back in the years. But she writes these senior citizens as you would expect them to be written by a senior citizen. They're all very realistic. You can see them in your head. You know exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about where you see somebody that's been married 50, 60 years to the same person, and that familiarity with each other and how they get along, the conversations they would have. It's all very authentic here. It's all very realistic, as it is for the younger people, more people of her generation. So there is something in here for everybody. And it's like she said in the back of the book, you know, older people, they get put in horror books to be the villain or the bad guy, you know, the creepy element. But here she uses them as characters, as the people you love, you're rooting for. You want good things to happen to them, but of course it's a horror book, so they don't. And I really, really love that. But the number one thing I really loved about this book is that it contains some wonderfully absurd things that turn out to be horrific. And I use the word absurd. I know it usually has a negative connotation with it, but I'm using it as an extreme compliment. All right? Because there are things in here that if some authors might have been, let's just say, you wanted to write a horror story. And you're sitting there, maybe you had a little bit too much of the devil's lettuce, you know, one night. And you think, wow, man, what if I wanted to write a story about this? And then, of course, once you sober up, you go, nah, nobody's going to want to read that. Nobody will print that. I wouldn't even know where to go with that. But this author, that wasn't a problem. I'm not saying she was on the devil's lettuce, but I'm saying she let her ideas, her creativity. She came up with an idea, well, why don't I use this as something as part of the plot of one of these stories, and she went with it. And she does it so well that in the stories, they make perfect sense. And it's not until you're done reading when you think, that didn't really make sense. But when you're reading it, it does, if you know what I mean. That's why I call it wonderfully absurd. It's a great quality. She brings things to these stories that's unique, stuff I've never read before. A talking refrigerator, a spider that will whisper in somebody's ear to do something horrible. There's one story in there about a cowbell. Hey, we need more cowbell, right? Saturday Night Live. But that story with a cowbell is going to remind you of Edgar Allan Poe's A Telltale Heart. It will. It's got that same vibe. But she uses a cow and a bell instead, and that's just great. That's just wonderful. But the one that made me laugh, and then until all the blood and the horrific stuff happened, was about a talking pimple, a talking zit that has some very horrific, murderous tendencies. And yes, you're going to have to read that one. You're going to have to find out exactly how that plays out, but it's fantastic. It's absolutely great. This collection is probably going to be one of the best anthologies of the year, I would think anyway. I haven't read a lot of anthologies this year, but if I was making a list of the best anthologies, I would put this one and the one I'm going to be talking about here in a few days, another anthology, by the way. I would put those two on the top of the list just for the creativity, the pacing, and the way they just, you know, like she just let her mind go to different places and put it all out on a page. And this thing will make you feel a lot of things, you know. It'll make you feel scared. It'll make you feel frightened. It'll make you feel a little melancholy sometimes. And there's one story in there, and I hope this isn't a spoiler, but this is the only story that's not a horror story, but it's very short. Written in first person about a person who has to put their pet cat to sleep. And then when you read the back of the book and realize that was based on a true story that she experienced, yeah, you're going to get a case of the feels. I'm not going to say I cried, but yeah, I did a little bit. Don't tell my dad. He used to always say, hey, put them tears back in your head where they belong, boy. Good parenting. But anyway, I highly, highly recommend this book. Like I said, the link is down below to Amazon if you want to pre-order it. Definitely, definitely do that. You will love it. I promise. And also down below is a link to my Twitter feed if you want to come over there and be a twit with me. And as always, I want to thank you for taking some of your time, spending it with me. I really, really appreciate it. Leave me a comment, like, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. And until we meet again, keep reading spooky, my friends.